Hi everyone, so if you did not complete the day one assignment about nationalism and the era of good feelings, then you're going to have to go back and do the day one assignment first because it leads right into the assignment today, which is all about sectionalism. So yesterday we went over how after the War of 1812, America had a new sense of nationalism. Today we're going to talk more so about sectionalism. Notice the word section in there. So basically, sectionalism is different than nationalism because sectionalism is loyalty to the interests of your own region or section of your country rather than to the country as a whole. So previously we were talking about nationalism, and that's great and all. You know, the nation was thriving. After the War of 1812, the American system made America more self-sufficient, so they didn't have to rely on foreign nations as much. We describe this period as the era of good feelings. So all of this nationalism, remember, nation versus section, basically caused the U.S. to grow and expand. The economy was better. Things were just going great. But as time goes by, although the country is growing and expanding, the different sections are going to be growing in different directions. The different sections of the country are growing in different ways. Which in a way kind of causes them to actually grow apart. So for example, the North is all about industry, like factories, manufacturing, production, and this is the opposite of the South, who's all about plantation farming and slavery. So they're both growing due to the economy booming, but the North's going to keep growing in their direction, the South's going to keep growing in their direction. So this kind of makes me think about growing apart from a friend. So we're going to do this little example first. So as time goes on, you might grow apart from some friends. Nothing wrong with that. People grow up. Okay, so this is a little bit of a sad example. I'm drawing this little timeline here, and these arrows represent two friends growing apart. Right in the center, I'm going to draw friend A and friend B. I don't know why I drew friend B first, but that's just how it went. So friend A and friend B. They're going to start at the same point. This is when they're BFFs, they're best friends since elementary school. They had the same classes in middle school. I drew a bunch of hearts, flowers, and smiley faces to represent how this is kind of like the era of good feelings. These were like the good old days when they were best friends. Okay, but then maybe high school hits, right? So we have freshman year, and they're going to grow a little bit apart. So friend A is going to be playing sports. I drew a lacrosse stick, field hockey stick, and a basketball. She's on all varsity sports. So that's one direction that she's going. She's growing in that way. And on the other end of the spectrum, we have friend B, and I drew attempted to draw a guitar there. So she learns the guitar. So she's growing in a different way too. But their interests are getting a little bit more separate. Okay, so now we move on to good old sophomore year. Maybe friend A gets a boyfriend, so that's now taking up some of her time and her interest. And maybe friend B, you know, she joins a band because now she's good at the guitar. There's a punk rock show featuring, I couldn't think of a good name. I saw a pineapple in the corner of my eye when I did that. Like, I had this pineapple thing on my desk. But that's not a good punk rock name, the Pineapples. So they're the, we decided their name is going to be the Spiky Fruits. That doesn't sound very punk rock, but it's more punk rock than the Pineapples. So she joins a rock band. So still growing apart in different ways. Moving along. So junior year comes, And friend A is really just focusing on her grades. She has sports. Now if the grades are there, she can get into a good college. So she's making honor roll. She's a straight A student making honor roll. So that brings up a whole entire new group of friends and different classes. And friend B, junior year, she is losing interest in school. She's failing because she doesn't want to go to college, and basically she loses interest in school, which would be one more step to these friends growing apart. Okay, this is the last one we're going to do for this example. So senior year, moving forward, friend A applies to schools and she ends up getting a full scholarship to Harvard. She's college bound. And friend B is going in a different direction. And it's not necessarily a bad direction, it's just different. In the example that I'm going to give you, the real life, it's bad because it's the South and slavery, but that's okay. So for this example does not have to be completely reflective of that. So basically the spiky fruits are going to tour, and that's the direction that she's moving in. So when friend A looks back at high school and her times, she goes, in high school I was a straight A athlete, and she's going to identify in that way. And friend B is going to say that in high school I was a punk rocker. But if we were to ask them about middle school, they'd say, well, in middle school I was best friends with friend A, I was best friends with friend B. That would be part of their identity. But now, as time goes on and they've grown apart from each other and grown in different directions, they have different ways that they identify themselves. So over time, they have less in common. They have different goals and aspirations. They can no longer really relate to each other, and this does not really need to happen with your friends. You can be a punk rocker and be friends with an athlete. This is just a weird example. And also, they can't, in this example though, they cannot maintain their friendship because it's cut off here, but they don't identify as unified anymore, like as best friends. They begin to have separate identities. So they're both growing in different directions, but unfortunately these directions are apart from each other. All right, so moving on to the next page. So for here we're going to talk about sectionalism, the real, and like not the, sorry, I'm distracted. Hold on a second, text message, okay. We're good. So we're going to talk about sectionalism and how this becomes, in the real life example, and how this becomes a major issue, especially when Missouri applies for statehood in 1817. So we're going to get back to that example in a minute. But before we do that, I really want us to highlight the differences between the North and the South. I could go forward and talk to you guys about the West, but I just want to keep it straightforward here. So I'm going to draw the North at the top, and in the South at the bottom. It got cut off. I didn't realize it, didn't feel like making this whole entire picture all over again. So write South at the bottom, just like how I wrote North at the top. Okay. Okay, I'm going to draw another timeline, but I'm going to make this one vertical because I don't want to confuse anybody with putting the North on the left-hand side or the right-hand side. So, okay, so they're both like the friends. Are going to start right in the center. In the center, they both have something in common. They both share the same country. This is like the era of good feelings, USA, everybody's united. But then there's going to be different things that happen that change their perspectives on things. So in the North, we have an industrial economy. So this is like factories, manufacturing, and trade. And in the South, it's that plantation economy, the harvesting of cash crops for massive profit. So cotton, rice, tobacco. Remember, tobacco, the more it's very labor intensive, and it also needs a lot of land. And the more land and labor you need, that it causes an increase for slavery. So The North is going to have free labor. So that means working for wages, or sometimes in some cases different boarding situations. And then the South is going to have obviously a slave labor. They need cheap labor, and in this case completely slave labor, no payment at all. The South does not have to pay for labor whatsoever, just for buying slaves. So that is a huge influence on their economy and how they run things. Okay, so in the North, they're in favor of the tariff. Remember that the tariffs protect industry because it makes Americans want to buy American products, not European products, because now they're too expensive. And furthermore, the North is in favor of spending on, and that says internal improvements. Internal improvements include things like roads, railroads, canals. Remember, all these things help industry because it makes everybody seem more connected. It costs less money because things are more efficient to ship. So they're going to do this. So even though this is going to cost taxes to build these things, it's worth it to the North because they're going to make more money out of their industry. The South's going to be against the tariff. They already had a trading relationship with Europe. And now that the tariff is in place, it's going to cost them more money. They don't think that that's fair. They see this tariff as benefiting the North because it does protect industry, but the South's not an industrial economy. So this does not. So now they have to pay more for goods for something that's going to benefit the North and not the South. So this is probably going to get cut off too. They are also, yep, guys. So they're also against federal spending on internal improvements, which seems strange. Like, why would you not support more roads and transportation? But the economy in the South is export oriented, so they just ship their goods off to Europe for the most part. They also are blessed with like natural waterways, so they don't really have a transportation issue down south. The transportation really helps industry. So the internal improvements would have to be paid for one way or another, and that would mean higher taxes. And once again, like the tariff, the South felt that it was unfair for them to have to spend more money for something that would mainly benefit the North. Okay, so going to the Missouri Compromise, this is when we really see sectionalism become a major issue. So Missouri wants to become a state. Okay, and there's two options, basically, when it applies for statehood. Is it going to be a free state? Or, option B, is it going to be a slave state? So in this case, Missouri is actually going to choose to become a slave state. So I'm drawing a little scales of justice here. So at the time, the U.S. has equal number of free and slave states. So they have 11 slave states and 11 free states. Well, unfortunately, when Missouri wants to enter the Union as a slave state, that's going to be 12 to 11. That's going to upset the balance. So if Missouri gets added as a slave state, then, like I said, there'll be 12 slave states and 11 free states. This is a huge deal because it's going to tip the scale, which is the balance in Congress between free and slave states towards the slave state side, and that really upsets people in Congress. It's a huge deal. So the solution is they come up with the Missouri Compromise of 1820, and I drew little band-aids there, and I'll get to that later. So part one of the solution is to add Missouri as a slave state. Okay, and this works out because very conveniently during this time, Maine, the state of Maine, also wants to be added as a state. Maine also applies for statehood conveniently at this time, and they would like to be a free state. So that was convenient. In addition, they state that there's going to be no more slavery north of the 3630 parallel, which I'll draw a really terrible picture of that in a minute. And this is Missouri's southern border. So from here on out, no more slavery above this line on the map. And what we get here is the Missouri Compromise. All of this contributes to the Missouri Compromise, which all in all kept the balance between 12, given that there is 12 free states and that there are 12 slave states. But this is why we'll see, we'll get to the Band-Aid part in a second. It's great and all right now because there's 12 free and 12 slave, but what about if another state wants to get added? Then what? Is it always going to be balanced like that? Okay, so here's a terrible outline of the United States. That's Texas. I'm sorry, Texas. And I drew Missouri. And then I don't know what that was. I don't really understand what I just drew there. I think I'm just trying to show that there's the free states and the slave states. Okay, so here's a line, and this is the 3630 parallel. This line says that there can be no more slave states added from here on out. Okay, so I'm going to draw, but the red's going to represent slave states, and I'll explain that. And then the blue represents free states. So if you notice, there are some slave states above the line, okay? But if you were, so the 3630 parallel, now there's no more additional slave states above this line. The only way you'd be allowed above the line and be a slave state if you were if you were already there before this compromise was made. So there are some states like Virginia that are already slave states and that are technically above this line. Or if you're Missouri, which is the last exception, the last state that is allowed above this line. And why is this a Band-Aid? Because this is a temporary fix to a larger issue. Once again, what if another state wants to get added? Then do they always have to get added in pairs? And another thing is that slavery is going to want to grow. Slavery is going to want to expand. The South's going to want to expand slavery, I should say. And they're not going to have anywhere to go. Thank you guys for watching. Make sure you upload your completed notes to Google Classroom by taking a picture with your Chromebook or your phone. Sorry about the angle at times. When I did that landscape angle, I think my hand got in the way a lot, but you can always just pause and then go back, and then you can get the notes that way. You don't have to like rush through. You can always pause the video. I won't do that angle again though. If you have any questions, please let me know, and you guys have a great rest of your day. Thank you.